Hey, everybody. Welcome to this limited edition podcast with myself, Dusty Arab. I'm running for Clark County Council, District 1. And today I'm speaking with Kim Harless Felix, who is running for, can you help me with the full title here?
Yeah, Washington State Representative, 49th Legislative District, Position 1.
Thank you. I knew I was going to say that wrong because I
really long.
usually say mine wrong. Amazing. Well, today we wanted to come and talk about Pride Month and the way that our identities are kind of intersecting with some interesting things that are happening here in Clark County, because there's just so much going on between all of the proclamations in Battleground and all of the conversation about the LGBTQ plus community that is happening there. And then and some more immediate things that we're experiencing as well. So Kim, I would love to hear more about your perspectives on your identity, who you care about, all of it.
Yeah, so my identity, you can start getting into a lot of all the different naming structures, and it's like, how much do you want to deep dive, right? And then those identities can also change over time as new language is developed, or as like human beings, we evolve over time too. How you might be 10 years ago is definitely a different person than who you might be today. And things can go back and forth. And so usually I lean on terms like demi-woman or gender fluid or non-binary, which is like the umbrella for all of that. And for me, with, just gender identity, I knew from a very young age that I wasn't like the rest of the girls and how I wanted to play. Most of my friends were boys. And it was interesting growing up. And then, teenage years coming around, and my friends who were girls, they would start being all like, boy magazines and like all the things. And I just like didn't get it. And, so kind of carved my own path and tried to find new friendships. And so today, new terms that I've come to use, again, are demi-woman and non-binary, gender fluid. Like there's days often every morning, especially if I have to go and like put on my politician mask or my representative mask, you have to dress for the part. And so for me and my body shape, that can include dresses, skirts, pants, blazers, whatever it might be. And I look in the mirror and I go, how do I feel today? Where am I landing on my own spectrum? And there's days where if I put on a dress, I'm like, I feel like I'm in a costume. Like you might as well dress me up like a clown. This does not feel right. And then I put on the pants. And then other days I'm like, I feel really like feminine today. I really want to dress up and I want to like, and it is that kind of like roller coaster that sometimes will confuse people because then they think you're only one thing, especially if you're very femme presenting. Like I can't help how my hormones and everything shaped my body. If it was up to me, it wouldn't probably look like this. But that's how that roller coaster happens every day in my life. And so it's really complicated. So usually I'm not sharing very openly, and I become a very private person as a result because it's a lot to try to educate and teach. People like a very just black and white or just two choices, right? Like you're either a woman or a man, or maybe a third option of non-binary. But then there's all these other things too, which is more where I land. So it gets complicated very quickly. But that's my gender identity. And then there's a whole bunch of other things too. But did you have any follow-up questions on that?
Man, I resonate so much with so much of that. But in particular, like that idea of like, anybody who's seen any photos of me knows that like style is like a big part of who I am. And it's something I really enjoy. I like playing dress up, but it's very much the same thing. It's always been either I'm dressing very like, back in the day, I would have said androgynous, or like, because that was, in high school, we had metrosexual, I remember, was one. It's a little dated now.
Yeah.
But like, it definitely swings for me. If you look at photos of me 2 years ago, I had like this long blonde platinum hair for like ages, and I loved it for a while. And then I realized that like having that was not allowing me to connect with more of the communities I actually cared about connecting with. Like it was buying me passage in a lot of straight white male cis spaces because I was appearing a certain way and fully like, and I was aware of what I was doing. Like I was purchasing access and privilege in that way until finally I couldn't take it anymore. And so I chopped it all off. And you know who approaches me now? Women and queers. It's great.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that you mentioned that because it is a good segue too in sort of the performance you have to do in order to be accepted and to just have a conversation. So it's not like you're trying to deceive anybody, but it's like, you know, that if you didn't walk into that space as your full person, or rather with your costume on, essentially, if you walked in as your full person, like, you might not be able to have a conversation at all. And so flexing based off of who you're talking to is a way to have conversation and come to mutual agreements and be able to focus on the essentially the policies that actually matter. And so I definitely do that too. Like, I know if I'm going into a space where I know there's more, I'll just say conservative leaning, just to keep things simple, conservative leaning folks, even though we have something we're in alignment with, like, I will dress more of a feminine stereotype because I know that that will be able to provide me more opportunity for conversation. Because then they won't try to marginalize me or like avoid me, if it's like a networking sort of event. And I always use that as a means to push forward, the greater good for our community. Right. And so it's like, it's not my personal interest, it's rather the interest of the community. And I know I have a role that I have to play, and it's not fun. And I wish that you could just walk into a new space as your full person. But if you're trying to create a good policy, that's what matters more to me than my own uncomfortable that I have to show up with.
God, well, and I'm experiencing so much of that too right now. Like, as a brand new person in politics, like, I've been at this like 9 whole weeks now, and I can already feel where I'm like closing off a little bit in certain ways,
Mhm.
or like feeling the need to show up again in specific rooms in certain ways. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm going to say meetings, I know that I can show up however I want to, and I will
Yes.
not be judged too harshly for that. Whereas, like, you can almost guarantee that if I'm going to any of the Dem events around town, you're going to see me in red lipstick,
Mhm.
because it's just like, it's like putting on the mask, like
Yeah.
putting on it's a very specific thing. And it is also, admittedly, like, because I have a marketing background, it's a
Mhm.
branding thing. Like, it's a brand color in my
Yep.
signs. Like, I literally matched my lipstick to the red on my sign.
Awesome.
That, yep. I like style stuff. So it's like parts of it are fun, but parts of it, they are strategic and not necessarily from a marketing and branding perspective. Like, it really is like you have to be able to pass in certain
Yep.
rooms. And so it's code switching, just like it is in
That's
any other like spoken
code switching.
context.
Yep. Yep. So much code switching all the time, and it's very draining. Like, if I have days where I had a day, what was it? I was at, I think it was a BIA function, and then I went to something else, and then I went to DS. There was like 3 or 4 things that were completely, and so, like, I was exhausted at the end of the day because of how much I had to code switch to be able to talk to folks in those different rooms. And definitely do say the most, like, I could, like, breathe and just kinda be present here. And if
Yeah.
anything, I'm gonna be judged because I am dressing a little bit not me, because I've
Yeah.
had to, over, what is it, 5 years now, play a certain part in order to be able to be in those spaces. So I almost feel myself in a defensive mode, like, "No, guys, like, I really am you. I promise."
That was how I felt with the blonde hair going into those spaces. I was like, guys, no, I'm not the bad guy. I know I look like the
Yeah.
bad guy sometimes, but I'm not. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a mean girl. Oh my goodness. I feel like that's a perfect transition point. So, on the one hand, we have like how we appear and how we're being accepted and interacted with in these spaces. Now, when it comes to Pride Month, that also has a lot to
Mhm.
do with who it is that we care about. And you and I are both in interesting spaces, and some oddly similar ones, because
Yeah.
we both have very important Johns in our life.
Mm. Yeah. Yep.
So tell me a little bit more about your experience with all things, talk about who you love and what that experience has been like for you as you've been moving into the political sphere in the public space.
Yeah. And so, yeah, when it comes to, romantic love and the relationships, it's again an area I largely try to avoid having conversation about because, again, it gets very complicated and people like things very like, you're in this column, or maybe this column. And it's just not that straightforward for me. I'm definitely under like the pan umbrella. I usually just say bye because most people understand that better. And it also is very fluid over time too, where I am at. And I have essentially always been in hetero presenting relationships. And it's not because I didn't want to be in other things. I've definitely had crushes and, all the things that, but they never worked out. And it's just basic math. And for a lot of bi people, and I'll just split it into very narrow columns of just men and women, just to keep it simple. understanding even me, like I'm not in one column. But, you look at like, like a pie graph of like, here's all of the people that are men that will date women, and similarly, here's all the women that would date men. And it's a large chunk, right? And you have a very small chunk of people that will date the same gender. And so if you are a bi woman that would date either, your options are a ton of men that would date women or a tiny little sliver of women that would date women. And so you don't have a 50-50 opportunity. It is largely, it's going to be men that will date women. And that includes bi men too. And often that is additionally always forgotten because there's so much targeting, I feel like, for femme presenting bi people because it's so easy to hate women. And there's a whole bunch of bi men out there, but largely they're not the focus of that anger or hatred or having to prove themselves, depending on the spaces that they're in. And, all the relationships I've had, I've always been very obviously like open with them about who I am and making sure that they were comfortable too with that. What it's like dating me is not going to be the typical woman that you've dated before because I'm also non-binary and I'm also pan and like, and having those conversations, I almost feel like every relationship I end up having to educate, which is also frustrating. But now, I find myself with my partner, John, and he's been absolutely incredible. Like I have never met someone so open and like being able to have that conversation with me in a way that like he's probably one of the few that like probably knew the least actually. And so like being able for him to be so receptive and like ask questions and that he knew like I could be defensive about and then just being so open and willing. And during Pride Month especially it becomes hard because you want to make sure that your queer community knows that you're there, that you are part of this bigger family. And especially when you're in a political position and a policymaker, you want to make sure that they know that you have their back. And you especially have their back because you're part of the family. But if you're in a hetero presenting relationship, people will try to say for some like, and it doesn't even make sense because like, what advantage would you even have from being able to fake something? It doesn't make sense. Like, there's been a lot of hardship. It's not something to fake for sure. And I'm not sure what you would even gain. But this sort of like, oh, she's not actually real, like actually bi. And she uses this. Actually, I heard recently somebody tell me that they had heard someone else say, like, yeah, she uses that two spirit identity. It's such a cop out. And it's just like, oh, okay. Like, and it's so you think, we're in a place where we can get past that. And then things like this happen, and it's repeated. Or like I'm in spaces, and I'm on a city council where there is a Ty Stober, he's a very out gay man, very proud, and I like working with him. But I have been in spaces where he forgets, that he's not the only queer person on the dais, and will say things like, "I am the only LGBTQ person on this council," and and sometimes he's like, "Oh shit, I forgot," and there's such a focus that we forget all the other letters of the alphabet in the LG plus two spirit. And it's really hard because I'm also not going to say something and then I'm the aggressor, right? Who's like, you forgot about me. But it's a conversation that our community needs to have about how to be better at being inclusive because it's not fair to my partner, too. He's so amazing. And so for him to be targeted in that way as well, it's just not right. You never want to bring family into the politics. And I try so much to protect my family. And then they end up getting brought in this way. And it's no choice of my own. But I also can't just have people targeting me and not be, say something out of defense, not only for me, but for everybody that has my identity too. And for the youth as well. I'm always thinking about the youth. Like, I want to make sure that they know that they have someone that looks like them, is like them, and who will defend them, and I'll take those first shards of the glass ceiling for them because I always want to leave a pathway that's a lot nicer than it has been for me.
God, there's so much to unpack there. Like that erasure, because that's what it is, that constant erasure of bisexual women in particular. Because I would say the same thing for myself. Like it's always been very fluid. Like I use she, they pronouns. All of it has been binaries have never been particularly appealing to me. And the older I get, the less appealing that they are. But I keep seeing it happen in these allegedly liberal Dem spaces where that erasure is constant. It is constant. And the fact that like it feels like it's putting you into the position of the aggressor just makes me sick to my stomach because like what a crock. Like I'm like trying to avoid using swears so we can publish this whole thing. But oh my God, it makes me so angry because it's just like it's always been like this. And I feel like for you and I, because we are the same age, we grew up with a very particular, a very limited view of like what sexuality could actually look like. And I know that growing up, I left the church when I was 18, and I left it because my best friend came out to me after we had to kiss on stage. We were in a musical together. And I mean, I should have known no boy loves to share as much as my gay bestie did. But the next day at church, they were preaching fire and brimstone on the gays. And like, it was very easy for me to leave at that point. But because of that background, because of all of that, it like there was a lot of fear even with like reaching out to women or engaging with women in that space. And even when I've had periods of being single, it does feel a lot more fraught. And, you know, I love that now there are so many people who talk about this particular thing for bisexual women being like, so you're a lady curious. This is like, here's how to date women. And I love that they're like Instagram influencers on this stuff now. Like, I'm just like, yes, I wish you were here like 20 years ago. Love you guys. But yeah, it is really challenging just to move in these spaces in this way to, I guess, to not be received in your entirety, because that really is what it is. Like, it feels like whether or not it's intentional exclusion, it's exclusion.
Yep. Yep. And it's, and I come to find that it's often for me, with all this, I call it duality in my life, because there's so many different areas of my identity too, where there's just like a lot of, I even have a tattoo that represents like duality, because I'm even a Gemini. I find that a lot of it is subtle. And it's about railroading other people. So if you're a nice person, you like to play nice, and you always try to play, the high game, the good game, that people take advantage of that. So I always try to be classy. I always want to walk away from a situation feeling like I did the right thing and that I can go to bed at night, or I can share with my kid that I did a good job today. But people will steamroll you as a result, because they know that, especially being a woman of color, any sort of thing that you say to defend yourself comes across as aggression. And I'm overly cautious about that, because every time I've spoken up, even the littlest bit, it's like Kim's on the attack. And it's really frustrating, because then the conversation gets changed from what I'm trying to talk about to, Kim's this wacky, like leftist, like she wants to, anarchy. Oh my God. And all I'm doing is just a really basic, very structured conversation. And so what happens, I've noticed when I'm campaigning, is people will be very subtle. So like the fundraiser we saw today, right? It's like, we're going to put this together and then not invite and create exclusion, and no one's going to call them out. And if no one calls them out, like, who's going to do it, right? Well, it has to be me. But now it's going to be all centered on me. So I have to make these careful decisions about when I call someone out or when I don't, because otherwise they do it very subtly, intentionally, to get away with it. And that's where the erasure comes in.
Totally. Well, and this event that we're talking about, like, it's public on Facebook. So anybody, like, if you want to go check it out, it's titled Celebrate Pride, which is not a problem, obviously. More gay and queer candidates across the board. I am so thrilled that we have so many incredible options and that they have the level of support that they do in this community. My issue was the language used and the fact that it looks like an official caucusing thing from the Clark County Dems, which it's not, but that's what it looks like. And because of that, it does look like very intentional exclusion of other queer candidates. I understand the need to differentiate, but I also don't understand why this is the tactic. Like, why does it have to be, I am the only blah, 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 blah. And like, when they're not, they're just not. And like, I know, especially before the primary, when people won't actually like have a spine and move behind the candidates that they should be, even though they're more qualified. Like, clearly I have opinions about that as well. But watching this happen with nobody else saying anything, like the fact that that it didn't even occur to anybody that this might have been happening. Like, it just goes to reiterate, like what you said, it forces us to speak up and look like we're the ones who are like, we're the ones who are the problem. Like, and that's just not reality.
No. And it's also when it's like, I know with certainty they should have known better.
Yeah.
This group, which isn't really a group even, It's a name, it's a label that's been around for a while that looks like an arm of the Clark County Democrats, but really there's only like maybe 2 or 3 people behind it, but it comes across as an official thing. And they endorsed me last year. They know who I am. And so for them to put a fundraiser together that doesn't include me, I know that was intentional. There's zero excuse. And the way that it was worded definitely came across as these are the only queer candidates.
Yeah.
And besides you mentioning it right now, and earlier I saw a comment about it, this is the first time I have heard somebody say, aren't we so lucky that we have multiple LGBTQ candidates vying for the same position? Has that ever happened in Clark County history? I don't know. But nobody is out there celebrating that. And I don't want to say it because, again, it's kind of like me testing the community in a way to see where they're at. It's like just crickets. Like nobody is recognizing that beauty that exists there. And this would have been the opportunity to do that. This would have been the time where the name of this organization or arm or whatever you want to call it could have seized that moment and could have invited all LGBTQ candidates, regardless of, I mean, I guess it's Democrat aligned, so it'd be Democrats. And I don't know of any Republican LGBTQ in the region that are running, but it could have been that opportunity to really celebrate that. And instead, they chose to weaponize it and weaponize gender politics and gender identities and sexual identities and do identity politics, pitting people against each other instead of celebrating the greater wonderfulness that our community has of having multiple people. It just blows my mind. That is the approach that other people will take. And it's really disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. And it's the reason we're having this conversation at all. So while it's unfortunate, I am really grateful that we've had the opportunity to like bring this conversation forward, and hopefully like moving forward, things will look a little bit more inclusive. And I know that's how both of us are really trying to run our campaigns and to bring people together in more of these spaces. So, I mean, as far as moving forward, what else do you have going on here coming up with Pride? I know we have Pride in the Park coming up on July 11th.
Yep.
Are you going to have a booth there?
I'm not going to have a booth. I'll be volunteering because my partner puts on the Pokemon Festival. And so that's the one time a year where I'm like, okay, you have me. Like, I will volunteer for a few days. But something beautiful happened this year, which at first was kind of like, oh no, where Pride in the Park runs on the same day. And I was like, John, my idea, we can make it happen. And for years, I've been asking him to do a Pokemon drag show. And my friend James, who puts on drag shows, and they're finally doing it. So I'm so excited for the like official after party for the Pride in the Park to be this Pokemon drag show. And they'll have other performers and stuff too. So that's definitely where I'll be at. And so I'm really excited for that. And I do have several fundraisers coming up. The most recent, the one that's coming up soonest is on July. Then there's one on July 16th and then July 23rd. So there's 3 opportunities coming up here pretty soon to help with the campaign financially. And then every weekend, we're going to be knocking on doors too.
Amazing. Amazing. And I am in a similar spot. I will be tabling at the farmer's market, not Pride in the Park, but it is literally right there on the side block there. So that'll be home base for me. So if anybody needs a spot to like go get some water, leave some literature, etc., come and find me. I will probably shove a tomato plant in your hands and make you take it home. Just heads up. And then my next fundraiser is actually going to be this Saturday at Dovetail Cellars. We have local folk legend Meridian Green performing. I will be showing up dressed as a pirate because I will be coming straight from the Renaissance Festival. So pirates are welcome. Besides that, my canvassing kickoff should be this weekend. So exciting.
Awesome. Very exciting.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for this conversation and being so open and generous with your responses. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening.